back to Subject to Change. This is Chad.
This is Matt.
And today we're going to talk about writing. Both of us enjoy writing, so we thought that was a good thing to have one of these early conversations about.
I agree. You enjoy writing?
Sometimes.
I find it's a labor of love.
That's actually a really good question. Let's start off with that question.
All right.
Do you enjoy writing? Or is it something that you're just compelled to do for reasons that you don't understand?
See, for a long time, I always thought I was compelled to do it.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I kept a blog for a long time. I had a journal that I wrote in. I know that you have a journal.
Yes.
And you know, I always felt that like I needed to write fiction, which is generally what I write is fiction. But I don't know, like, I love it and sometimes I hate it, but I hate it because it doesn't. I don't think I hate writing. I just hate the fact that I can't get it out to more people.
Oh yeah.
You know, like
Oh.
being able to, because since I write fiction, it's something that I want other people to read, and
Of course.
and not having a lot of concrete avenues for that to happen is frustrating. I'd say I don't hate it. It's just frustrating.
Yeah, well, that part I agree with very much. Yeah, that part's very frustrating. The actual act of writing you enjoy, though?
Oh no, yeah. That depends too. If I have a day of, you know, motivation, like I can crank out 5,000 words.
Yeah,
like
I can't. But.
Yeah, there have been days where I just sit down and I just write, and then there are other days that turn into weeks, that turn into months where I don't write anything, and that's also very frustrating. But the act of writing itself doesn't feel like a chore.
That's good.
It feels good to do.
Yeah.
I enjoy the act of writing.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not I can get myself in the mood to actually do it is the hard part.
Well, that's good to hear. I don't always love it, I'll admit.
Is it because, like I said, I write fiction? Is it because you write real life accounts, or because of like? I think if you want to go into what you write about.
Well, yeah. Well, let's talk about that before we go too much farther, because we should let the people know what we actually write about. Mm-hmm. What I mostly write about now is the trips that I take. I go backpacking fairly frequently. I like to go camping. I like to travel. I like to explore cities and museums, just new places, and I like to write about it. And that's what I do mostly right now.
So you say travel writing?
Yeah, I'm not
in a way.
Yes, in a way. Yeah, I was. I'm not sure that I would exactly call it travel writing because I don't know if I go anywhere quite exotic enough. I think most travel writing involves going to more exotic places than I go to, and interacting with the people more. My stuff is more introspective, and everything I've written about so far is it takes place in this country. You know, I haven't even gone abroad.
Well, I think as a genre, if I would classify it as a genre, it's like memoir / travel writing, because part of it is very introspective, like you said. Yeah. But another part of it is very descriptive of where you're going.
It is, yeah, maybe,
or where you've been. Now, you can't talk about where you're going. You haven't
right,
been there yet.
Right.
That's
it's travel or nature writing. Sometimes I think of it more as nature writing.
Yeah.
Not the kind of nature writing, not documentary style nature writing. Not the kind of stuff where I'm trying to educate people.
But I don't know if you get told this, but you do. I mean, whenever I read your writing, mm-hmm. On your blog, you talk about plants and trees and the animal, the flora and the fauna.
Right.
And I'm just like, it's green, it's live. I don't know the names of things. Like the fact that you can name the things that are around you. It shows a lot to your dedication to knowing those things.
Yeah.
Because, I can go on a walk or a hike
mm-hmm.
and just be in there. But then you take it to a different level with your knowledge of where you are, the history of the place.
Right.
People like your most recent ones. You talk about going to Maine. The other people who have been there and the books that you've read and all this other ancillary stuff.
Yeah.
Aside from just going there and talking about
mm-hmm. it. Yeah, and I'm glad that you learn things from it. And I do. If people learn things from it, I do want it to be in that way. It's not like the direct purpose of it is to inform or to teach. But yeah, if there's stuff in there that people want to pick up on and learn more about, or just little facts that can educate people, that's good.
Yeah, that's one thing that I take away from your
that's
writing.
good. I'm glad to hear that. What about you? What do you like to write?
Well, when I first started writing, it was more not really like high fantasy, but fantasy fiction, sci-fi stuff. Just very escapist fiction. Because when I was a teenager, I really wanted to escape real life because it sucked. So I wrote a lot.
Right.
And then the older I got, the more I started to reflect on my own life and writing about my own life, I started to delve more and more into a realism vein of fiction.
Right.
So it's, slice of life, people dealing with their emotions, and there isn't really a large plot point or some sort of hero's journey. It's more of just people dealing with emotions. Like I've written a couple recently. Well, recently, the past couple of years, but they're like my most recent pieces about people dealing with depression, death, and just the emotions that come with those big life moments.
Right.
And not in a fantastical way. So there isn't like, fights or robots or anything like that. It's very down to earth, just people living their life, and these things happen. And I think I write those things as like a cathartic release for my own, emotional trauma. Or
writing is a great way to do that. And I think that your slice of life or your writing that involves just regular people dealing with regular problems, I think that's what you're best at least out of the stuff that I've read of yours.
Thank you. Which, that's not the only thing I write. I've also been working on a couple novels that are in the steampunk genre, which are more fantasy, sci-fi based. But I also try to tie in, at least try to keep that slice of life emotion in there. I don't want it to be too over the top, because one thing that really draws me in to good fiction is the characters and the interactions they have. And if they're really down to earth and are expressing real human emotion, then it doesn't matter what the setting is, as long as they're real.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that maxim of writing? It goes something like, the more fantastical the setting and the plot, the more down to earth and realistic the characters need to be.
No, I've never
and vice versa. Like if you want to do something really weird with character, then you should put it in a very realistic, normal setting.
No, I haven't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that from several different places. And I think I don't know. I think that might be accurate. I've never spent a whole lot of time thinking about it, but
I mean, if I'm going to take two books or authors that I've read recently, that I think illustrates that point very well, is Haruki Murakami, who's a Japanese author who writes a lot of surrealism. Almost all of his settings are modern or recent Japan. Like, there's nothing weird about it.
Yeah.
There's nothing crazy. But then the characters, who are still generally normal, get thrown into really weird situations.
Yeah.
Like, in one book, he has a character who can talk to cats. He's got another character in a different book who she gets pulled into her TV and lives like a weird dream world.
Yeah.
But it's still like so that kind of goes to what you say, like really weird character circumstances,
right.
But in a normal setting.
I think that's exactly what that means.
But in like Game of Thrones, say, is in a fantasy setting.
Yeah.
But all the characters are very set in stone.
Right.
And,
they're like normal people.
Yeah, they have normal people. They're just living in a fantasy world.
Right.
Like most of them don't deal with magic or anything crazy or any like hero's journey type stuff. They're just living their lives.
Yeah.
It just happens that dragons exist.
Yeah, all of their major problems are just regular human problems that most people deal with. It just happens to be in a fantastical setting. So yeah, I mean, maybe those are very good illustrations of that. I think just something to think about.
But for me, in my writing, I haven't really tried to do that myself. I think with the realistic, the literary stuff that I've written, I just try to make it as real as possible and make the characters as relatable as possible.
Right.
So
Which
that
I think you're very good at.
So that even if you haven't necessarily expressed or had those same feelings yourself, that you can empathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
Without having to do anything fantastical.
Right. I'm curious whether... Is everything that you write intended to be read by other people? Or do you ever write just for yourself?
I think most of my blog, which I kept for almost 9 years, a lot of that was me writing to myself. Some of it was writing that I wanted other people to read, but that was very pointed, and most of the time I'd send it to them,
right.
People directly. In general, though, that was more of a dumping ground, more of a, like, that type of writing was something that I wanted just to get off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not someone read it, it didn't really matter.
Right.
I mean, that my blog has been quote-unquote public for almost 10 years, but I don't give it a lot of traction.
Is it still?
It is now. It's still.
So if somebody wanted to find it, they could, but you don't direct people to it for the most part.
Yeah, no. There was a stint there for about 3 months where I was writing a lot of poetry, and I made that really... I pushed that because that was something that I kind of wanted some feedback on.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really... I don't broadcast that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that I write that's more traditional, I guess, like my short stories or my novel ideas, those are things that I want other people to read because that's part of my, the hobby of writing and the desire to have that be a career path or some sort of money-making venture.
Right.
Aside from, it's like I have this skill of writing and I want to use that to those ends, so I have to have people read it. And a lot of the stuff I write for people to read.
Right. Okay.
Is that what you would say you do with your travel writing, your blog?
Yeah. I was going to say that's the first thing that I've written in a long time that I intended other people to read. I started the blog. Blog isn't even really a good word for it because I don't really. It's not regularly updated. I do about one post a month, and they're long posts. It's more like a website for my writing than it is anything. But I'm going to call it my blog because that's just what I do. I started that about 4 years ago, and that was the first thing that I'd written for other people to read in years. I used to write stories. I used to write novels, crappy novels when I was a teenager. I've always written, actually. I can remember back in grade school writing stories and short little books. That was a major interest of mine in grade school. And then there was a long period of time in my 20s where I didn't write anything for other people to read at all.
Really?
I've had a private journal that I've written in every day, and that's been going on for almost 20 years. Next week, it'll be 20 years that I've been doing that. And that was enough for me for a long time. I kind of gave up on writing for other people for a while.
Was it because you weren't getting any feedback, or is it just because you felt like you didn't really need to write for anyone else, you just wanted to write for yourself?
I think it was more that I just didn't think I was good enough. And I was busy. I kind of, in my 20s, I got away from doing several of the things that I really enjoyed. And that just happened to be one of them. But yeah, about 4 years ago, I decided to start writing again for other people to read, just to see what would happen. And that's what I did. I have about 40-ish pieces on my blog now. And it's gone pretty well. I suppose we should say that neither one of us has been published. You haven't been published, have you?
I have not.
Not yet. And neither have I.
Not yet, yeah.
So
that's the right...
Exactly.
Yeah, not yet. So we're not experts. We're just amateurs.
Yeah. And I really don't... At this point, I don't expect to ever be published. It would be nice if I could be. I don't expect to ever make any money on my writing. At this point, it's just for my own enjoyment and for the enjoyment of the people that I know and the few people who read it. And of course, I would be happy if somebody wanted to pay me for it, and I wouldn't turn that down. And that's kind of the that's the dream. But I don't expect anything like that, and I'm just kind of doing it for myself, and sort of as something to leave behind also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think legacy is a big thing for a lot of writers, whether or not they become super famous or not.
Yeah.
You know, like that like the whole idea of writing is to make thoughts more permanent.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so if you're the type of person who's drawn to writing, whatever type of genre it is, you want your ideas to have some sort of concrete, you know, existence.
Yeah.
And I think there's something special about that. You know, any type of person, any artist, because writers are artists, just with words instead of pictures or music. They want to take what's in their head, you know, the music in their head, the pictures in their head, the words in their head, and they want to make it concrete. And I think, you know, me being someone who writes more fiction sees a different world that I'm intrigued by, that I want other people to be intrigued by. With the more fantasy stuff. With the realistic stuff, it's more, I have these problems or these emotions that I want to work through, and writing them down helps do that. And I know that, and I feel like reading them also helps people. Like, there's a couple pieces that I've written in the more realistic literary style that have brought out a lot of emotion in people. And, you know, being able to express your emotions through art, you know, if you listen to a piece of music and it makes you tear up, you're having a connection with another human being. And I think that's one thing about art and writing in general that we kind of take for granted. And I know with your writing, I've told you this a couple times when I read it, it feels like even though I didn't go on the backpacking trip with you, your level of detail and your level of connection with the world that you inhabit while you're there and the way you express it in your words makes me feel like I went on the trip with you.
I'm glad to hear that, because that was the goal from the very beginning of the blog. It was because it was a similar thing for me. It was, I want to write something that other people are going to read, but the real reason for it was that I want to share my joy with other people. Really, you know, I love being out in the woods, and I love being on the road, and I love exploring new places. And of course, I can't take very many people with me. A lot of times I'm by myself, or I'm just with one other person. And I love it so much that I want to share with everybody. And so that was one of the main goals of the blog.
And I think you succeed in that endeavor.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, that's what it was. One of my first goals was I want to make you feel like you were there with me. And it's gotten a little bit into other stuff, but I can talk about that later.
Well, I mean, I'd say that a lot of my goals with writing, when I first started writing seriously, like wanting to write books, my intention or goal was to write, because I didn't read a lot when I was young. So, and one of the reasons why I didn't read a lot is because I felt like there weren't a lot of books that I was interested in.
Yeah. So
I took the idea that if I couldn't find a book that I wanted to read, I'd write one. So that was one of the initial reasons why I wanted to write, was to write a book that I would want to read.
I think that's a really good idea, actually.
Some recent author just died, and that was one of her quotes too. Can't remember her name. Toni
Morrison.
Yeah, Toni Morrison. That was one of her quotes. If there's a book, you can't find a book that you want to read, write your own.
Really?
Some variation.
I really like that. When I was thinking about what I was going to say for this podcast, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, I write the sort of thing that I want to read. And I figure if I want to read it, then there's got to be other people out there who want to read it.
Yeah, so there a part of the reason why I started writing was that idea that I wanted to write something that I would have wanted to read if I had picked it up in the bookstore or at the library.
Right.
But more recently, since my content is sort of shifted from fantasy towards realism, is that I want to write more about the human condition in general. Since we have this in common about reading a lot of Russian literature from the 19th century, which deals a lot with, you know, the human condition and a lot of philosophical ideas and stuff. And more recently, I think my writing has had more that bent where I want to delve into human emotions and deal with my own, but also, shed light on things that I haven't had to deal with yet, but that I'll eventually have to deal with in my life.
Deal with the problem of existence.
Yeah. And pretty recently I wrote, there's a piece that I'm going to present to my writing group, which I just joined the Boone County
good.
writing group last week. I'm going to present my story called The Past, which is about a young man who returns to his hometown for a funeral. And it goes through him reliving his past while he walks through this ghost town that he grew up in, while he's going to deal with this monumental change in his life, a death of a loved one. And that's not something I've had to deal with directly, but there are bits and pieces of that have shaped my life that I can translate through that character to different people to read. And maybe it's something that a reader has dealt with themselves. And I think, like I said earlier, being able to make that connection with another person through writing, I think, is really important to foster emotion.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know how that goes. This is a little bit of a change of subject here, but something you said earlier reminded me of this. I'm not sure that you have this problem, but for my entire life, I've always had the problem where I write something and I'm excited about it and I think it's really good. And then a year later or 6 months later or sometimes a week later, I'll go back and read it and I'll hate it. I mean, I can't figure out why I ever thought it was good.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's happened with the majority of the things that I've written. I mean,
Yeah.
there's that honeymoon period where I am just so in love with myself and
Yeah.
so in love with what I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I'll go back and I'll reread it again like, wow, this sucks.
Yep.
But then there's stuff that I'll go back and read and I'll be like, I thought, maybe like there's been times where I've written something and I'm like, that's not really that good.
Mm-hmm.
But then I go back and read it later and I find a lot of merit in it.
I've
find,
had that
like,
experience too.
Yeah, I'll go back and like, wow, this is actually pretty damn good. Why did I... Like, earlier this year when I was writing my horror series, my 4-part horror series, there's a couple of them that I really like. And then the very last part, which is like the culmination of everything, it felt weak to me. Like, it didn't feel as good or as pointed as the first 3 pieces.
When you were writing it, you mean?
Yeah, when I was writing it, it didn't feel as deep. It didn't feel as good. And I finished it and I kind of put it on the shelf or whatever. It's been on my horror blog Dreamworlds for a long time, so it's been public, but I haven't really revisited it until recently. I just got a weird bug and I was like, man, I want to read that. And I went back and I read the last part and I'm like, wow, this actually isn't as bad as I thought it was. It doesn't work without the other pieces, because it's part 4 of a 4-part series. But writing wise, one thing I always critique about myself is how intelligent the writing sounds.
Yeah.
Like if it sounds really basic or if it sounds deep, and I don't want it to sound pretentious, but some writing that seems lazy.
Yeah.
Like you just get the sentence out and you don't really care how it sounds.
Right. Very workmanlike.
Yeah, and other work that you know that a lot of thought was put into the words that were chosen, because that is a thing that goes. In my head, I don't know if this goes through you when you're writing, when you're translating from your journal into your blog posts about your trips, but there are certain times where a sentence just doesn't sound right. It conveys the right language. It conveys the right idea. It just doesn't use the right words, or it doesn't convey the right emotion or what have you. And you have to, sometimes, like, I'll be writing a long piece. I get stuck because I don't know how to word something. Mm-hmm. I'll just go blah, 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 blah. And, just write it real quick.
Yeah. And
then to get past it to the next thing. And then you have to go, that's, a big part of editing is revisiting old ideas to sharpen them up and make them punchier.
Oh, I do the same thing. I do a ton of that. I mean, I'm a big believer in the idea that there may be a lot of synonyms in the English language. There are a lot of words that mean very similar things, but that there's always a word that is right.
The correct
for
word.
There's always a correct word.
Kind of like when I couldn't remember the political engagement. When I forgot political engagement is the phrase.
Right.
And I said, political involvement.
Yeah.
That gets the right idea across, but it's not the right word.
And I think a lot of it has to do with connotation. Like words, they don't have just their denotation. Words have connotation, and that differs from person to person to some extent. But there's a lot of words. There's a lot of connotations that we all share, or most of us share anyway. And so I'm always struggling with that. And that is a big thing with going from my journal to my blog. Because, I whenever I take a trip, I write about it in my personal journal, too. That's kind of my rough draft. And then I translate it to the blog. And, most of the time, even if I thought it was fine as it was, it turns out that, none of it's right. Because I didn't go back and I didn't edit anything. I just got it out as fast as I could.
Yeah.
And I do tend to do that when I'm revising, too. If I get stuck on a sentence, I just write something that'll do for now, and then I go back. And sometimes it takes me... I get really hung up on that, and sometimes it takes me days or maybe even weeks until the right phrase comes to my head.
Yeah.
And a lot of time, it just pops into my head.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens.
I don't do any work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually something else I wanted to talk to you about. Because that kind of relates to the idea of, do you have to be in a proper mindset to do writing? Do you need a proper atmosphere or mindset in order to be able to write? Well, or can you just sit down and crank out 5,000 words?
I think some days, there was very recently, I've had a really bad writer's block. I've sat down, tried to work on things, and nothing has come. No ideas, no motivation, no muses, nothing. Which is very frustrating, because when you're someone who enjoys writing, enjoys that, you want to have ideas to flesh out. Not that I have a lack of ideas to flesh out. It's just, if I'm not in the right mindset and don't have the right motivators, nothing will come. And there have been times when, like January of 2018, I made a post every day in my blog. Mm-hmm. Every single day. I made it I actually kind of pushed myself. I said I wanted to post either a poem or a post, something, every single day that month, and I did. And then that kind of dropped off really quickly because I didn't keep that up for the year.
Wow, it's very hard.
But, back then I had a different level of motivators. I was talking to a girl, so that was a motivator. I wanted her to read my writing. Having an audience has always been a big thing for me. There was one time a couple years ago when I started writing a sci-fi series. There's a bunch of different shorts that I wanted to write. More of like a writing exercise than a writing that I really wanted to show anyone. And I started sharing them with one of my friends. His name's Josh. I started emailing them to him, and he's like, wow, these are really good. When's the next one? I'm like, I wasn't expecting to write a next one, so I wrote another one.
Yeah.
And then I wrote another one, and I kept sending them to him to read.
That's a big motivator.
Yeah. So having even him just as my audience really helped kind of churn out more and more ideas. And then eventually that kind of slowed down because I started working on different things. But, having the motivation of an audience has always been a big thing for me. But I think I do need a certain atmosphere. I used to write a lot to music. I would get home from work at 4 a.m. and put on one album, put it on repeat, and just write. It could only be that album. If it was anything else, I'd get distracted.
Yeah. And
the lights were off. It was just me, the computer, and the music. That doesn't work with every piece. It really only worked for that idea. I've listened to different music for different writing. Sometimes I put on certain types of music to help inspire me.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people do that a lot.
Yeah. When I was writing my horror stuff, I was listening to a lot of dark ambient music which is like droning sounds and like
Yeah.
very kind of dark stuff to put me in that mood, you know,
Right.
since I was writing that. And then when I started writing those sci-fi shorts, I listened to more. It was also ambient music, but it was more. It sounded more like Blade Runner, so
okay.
more sci-fi.
Yeah.
You know, to put myself in the right
More
mindset.
synthy.
Yeah, so that I would give myself a setting that I was in, so that my writing would hopefully reflect
Yeah.
that.
I need to find that one album that I can listen to while I write, because I need silence and I need solitude
Yeah, I mean,
if I'm gonna write.
yeah, no. Some people have talked to me about that too. How they can't listen to anything; it's a distraction. And to me, I need to have music on to
Well,
write.
I've heard that from other people too. That there's people that just need some kind of. It's like having a fan on when you're trying to go to sleep. You need something to
Some
kind
sort
of white noise. Yeah. But one other thing I wanted to say about that, and this kind of leads into something else about my writing, is that I find that I do the best sentences come to my mind when I am out in the woods, which is convenient because that's what I'm writing about.
Yeah.
But I've found that if I go out into the woods and I force myself not to think about anything else, and it's difficult because I'm always thinking about the book I'm reading and politics and philosophy and family problems and personal problems. I have trouble not thinking in general. So I go out in the woods and I have to force myself not to think about anything. But if I can do that, not only does it put me in a really good observational mode where I notice everything, but words just seem to come to me when I do that. It's like I'm being opened up to something that is pouring words into me, which is kind of what the word inspiration means. It means like breathing. There's a root, a Latin root, I think, to that word that means breathing in, something like that. The opposite of respiration, inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Something is being breathed into you. And that's almost what it feels like. Sometimes I can just, like, I don't know where the words come from. They just come to me when I'm in the woods. And
I almost said something inappropriate. Go on.
and we're going to cut that out. And I don't know, what was I going to say?
You were talking about inspiration. But no, I understand what you mean about inspiration, is that I was going to say that I don't want to say I've done my best writing, but I've done a lot of good writing when I was depressed.
Yeah?
Yeah, if I was in a certain emotional state, writing became easier. But then it became harder again because depression isn't really good for you.
Yeah. It
You know,
also
as a motivator.
robs you of all your passions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in that little sliver of time where it actually helped because I was in a certain emotional state, I wrote a lot of stuff. And it was a lot of... I think I was using the writing, again, like I said before, as a cathartic release. And in that release, I got a lot of crap out and a lot of good writing.
Yeah.
So I didn't know... I was going to ask you if you felt like... You said that you get better writing out when you go out into the world and kind of like let the rest of your life kind of fall away. Do you think you're in a different emotional state inherently because of that, or no?
Yeah, I think so. And what I was going to say is that this is kind of whatever that state is kind of what I'm trying to replicate in my writing. Like I'm trying to put into words the state that I'm in when I go out into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't consider myself I don't think most people would consider me a religious person, but I wonder sometimes if the feelings and the states of mind that I experience when I'm out in the woods are the same sort of feelings that other people would describe as religious. And I've done some reading about religion, and I've done some reading about altered states of consciousness, and I've found some similarities in that stuff to the sort of things that I feel. Like I read recently, I read some Huxley, Doors of Perception and Heaven and Hell. It's about his experiments with psychedelics.
Nice.
And he writes some stuff. There's some passages in there. Some of them aren't his. He's quoting other people who've experimented with drugs, and some of the things he writes, I think, well, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
No, I've never done psychedelics.
Yeah, no.
But I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, no. That sort of out of body feeling, or like the fluid feeling that you have,
like the flow state. I think the flow state is part of it. I just wrote about that a little bit, I think, in my main trip.
Yeah.
And then right now I'm reading William James's The Varieties of Religious Experience, and it's like a psychological exploration of subjective religious states and people, and he quotes all kinds of people talking about their religious experiences. And there's some of them that are, I know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're talking about like, the unseen reality that they experience on a mountaintop, and they call it God. I don't know what to call it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to find out, I think, in my writing. And I'm sort of seeing my writing going in more of that direction, like more exploring my subjective consciousness when I'm out in the woods, almost as if it were an altered state of consciousness.
I think that's a good journey to go on with the writing. You kind of start with the basic idea of, this is where I went on my trip. Mm-hmm. These are the people I met, what have you. And then you start to dig deep within yourself while you're out there. And then that kind of translates into your writing. And I think any real writer who thinks in those terms uses their writing as a way to dig down into themselves. Because I think I said this to you the other day, that there are a lot of writers and musicians, like lyricists and things, who seem to be writing the same thing over and over and over again.
Oh, right. Like single artist will continually write the same sort of thing.
Yeah, the same, but not like the same song, but like the same themes, or like trying to get to this get to the same conclusion in multiple iterations.
Yeah, exactly. I know what you're talking about.
And they can't get it, so they try again, and they try again, and they get a little closer, and they get a little closer. And I've noticed that a little bit in my writing, is that, it started out as just escapism.
Mm-hmm.
But then the more I write and the more I use writing as an introspective lens, I'm seeing more and more into my own life and my own interactions with people and my own interactions with myself, and the impact that has on myself emotionally, on others emotionally. And, I haven't found the right representation. Because like you said, that you want to show people the feeling that you get.
Right.
That's hard to do. Like, you can't show a feeling through words.
Right.
Like, it's something that is so ethereal that you just try your best.
Right.
And you're never going to get it right, so you're just going to keep trying.
Right.
And I think that a lot of artists do that. Like, they have that sort of emotional, spiritual connection with something, or like their inspiration or their muse or whatever compels them to create things.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to share that compulsion with someone else, but the translation medium doesn't get it right.
Yeah.
So you have to keep trying.
Yeah, that's another thing about the stuff I've read about altered states of consciousness and religion. One of the recurring themes in all that stuff is people saying, I can't explain it, or there's something that I couldn't put into words, or me describing it is impoverishing the experience. It doesn't. This is a terrible imitation of what it was like. And I think I know what that feeling is, and I want to capture that in words.
Uh-huh.
And I do think I think I've been slowly moving toward that in my writing. I don't know. I mean, this might be like career suicide to pursue that. I don't know. Nobody might be interested in reading that, but
I think if you look, if you want to go down that avenue just a little bit more, about the viability of doing that, I think spirituality outside of religion has obviously grown more recently, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Once people have kind of seen the dogmatic side of religion and kind of dismissed it, but they still want to find some sort of deeper meaning.
Yeah.
They're looking more towards these spiritual avenues. That's why things like meditation have kind of become bigger in the West, and these kinds of thoughts about, non-religious spirituality. And I think when you use your writing for yourself, if you want to distill that feeling if you can just distill that feeling for yourself and translate it into words, then that's one step in the right direction. And I think a lot more people now than ever will be open to that interpretation of, taking a hike in the mountains. If you can tie it to something deeper and more ethereal, but also keep it grounded, because while you did have that feeling, that wistful feeling that you can't really describe into words, you were still standing on the ground with the wind blowing by you. You're still, it's not like you were thrown into the clouds.
Oh, right.
This thing. Like you can keep it grounded, but you can also kind of put in this other side of how it affected you on a different level.
Like I guess what you're saying is that we become a very skeptical people, and this is something that even skeptical people could appreciate. This is an approach to that thing that even the most hardened atheists and a materialist could appreciate.
Because you said yourself that when you were reading these books on these religious interactions or these feelings, that despite you being a religious person yourself, you felt them. Because I think that these feelings, these notions of something greater, something different,
right,
something ethereal, is human.
It's
not necessarily tied to anything supernatural
right.
in those terms. It's just, it's something that we all have felt before.
Yeah.
And if you can illustrate those things without a religious context,
right,
I think that you can actually bring in more people.
Yeah. Well.
To thinking about those things and realizing that what they felt, A, they're not alone in, and B, it doesn't have to be tied to some religious dogma.
Right. You don't have to go to a specific church and believe everything that they want you to believe.
Yeah, like with your writing, you could say, if you take a drive to your nearest park and just walk around for an hour, you can feel this way. It doesn't have anything to do with paying any money or spending any time in a place you don't want to be, or being around people that you don't know, or subscribing to some sort of dogma, whatever it is, to have this feeling. It's just something that you have to go out into the world and experience.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I hope people are more open to that than ever, and that is something that interests people. I don't know if... I know there are other people doing that kind of thing out there, but... And I think you're right. I agree that people do have a spiritual impulse, or I guess you could even call it a religious impulse, even though religion as a term has sort of come to mean institutionalized religion, organized religion. I don't think it has to, though, and I think some people are trying to take that word back into just a more general...
Yeah. And I think over the past 30 years or so, the idea of being spiritual as a state, like instead of, I'm not a Christian, I'm not Jewish, I'm spiritual.
Right.
Like that's kind of the natural evolution. If you want to talk about these ideas, once you can get out of the classroom of religion and go out into the real world, you can start experiencing things, and that spirituality doesn't go away because it's not tied to that. But I think we're going a little off course.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll I'm sure we will discuss more of these topics later on. But yeah, we should pull it back into more about writing.
Yeah, more about writing. Are there any... So when I'm actually curious, I was going to ask you this earlier. When you said that you used to write for other people when you were younger, did you try to write fiction? Because I know that you've talked to me before that you feel like you don't have a mind or like a creative eye for fiction.
I know, I have told you that, and I do feel that way. But I was thinking about that this week, and when I was preparing for this, and I did used to write fiction. I wrote fiction for like 15 years, starting in grade school and up through maybe early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And I wrote 2 complete novels.
See, I didn't know that.
And I wrote a couple other partial novels. Well, you didn't know that because I'm so embarrassed by them that I barely even think about them. They're so bad and make me cringe so much that...
Are they better than our friends' work?
I don't know.
Are they on par?
Probably right there.
Well, I want to read them.
Yeah. Maybe that's probably another reason why I've never told you about them, because I knew you would say you want to read them. They're just awful. And but you're right, though. Maybe that does demonstrate that I have it in me to write something fictional.
Yeah, and I mean, not that you have to.
Right.
I mean, you obviously want to write your passion,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that what I thought was that the way you talked about you not writing fiction, you made it sound more like you've never written fiction, you've never tried to write fiction, and like you don't even understand how someone could. Like in my head, I'm just like, oh, I guess people can be like that. I mean, I know people who don't listen to music,
right?
So.
Well, I guess I'm not that bad because. I guess I only say that because I failed so badly at writing fiction.
Because you stopped trying. If I had just written the stuff I written in high school and thought, wow, I suck, I'm never going to get any better.
Yeah.
Because the stuff that I wrote in high school is garbage.
Well, it's probably pretty similar to the stuff that I wrote.
I will read some on air if you want me to.
Well, you might have to do that.
Yeah.
What was I just going to say? And I also forgot that I have started a couple short stories, fictional short stories in recent years, too. I started a couple short horror stories.
See?
Never finished them, but yeah, I guess every once in a while I get a little bit of an itch fiction bug, yeah.
Yeah, because it's awesome.
And I've had a few ideas about writing a novel about the wilderness, about I think I've called it about the wilderness of the soul. You know, somebody who's exploring.
That's funny because I had a similar idea for a book, and,
really?
And I don't go out in the wilderness.
Yeah, well, it was about somebody who's exploring the external wilderness, but also exploring their interior wilderness, which is what I think I'm doing when I go out there. But I've had a few ideas for a novel about that.
Well, you should find those notes and write something. Because I want to read it.
I have a couple scenes written, actually.
Well,
maybe I'll show them to you. You
should, because I share all my writing with you, and you have been holding out.
I'm not really holding up my end of the bargain here.
So you said that you were, that's the dream when you said something about being paid for your writing. Have you ever thought about compiling your blog, your website, into a novel, maybe like the nonfiction version of what you just said about your fiction novel?
Yeah, I have thought about doing that actually. That's not off the table. That's something that I might do at some point. I don't know if I would be doing that just for myself and to distribute to people that I know, or if I would try to actually sell it and make money on it. I mean, I would like to. I have a long road ahead of me. If I want to do that, I got to find people who are interested in it and find a way to market it and all that stuff.
True.
But if I could do that and there were people that wanted to read it, yeah, I would definitely do that.
I think there's a market.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole travel writing section at the bookstore.
Right, there is.
So, but when I say travel writing, I know that some people might think like, oh, you should go to New Zealand because New Zealand is da-da-da-da-da. No.
Right.
When I think of travel writing, I think of what you write. Like, you traveled somewhere,
right, and
you're writing about it.
Yeah, okay.
That's what when I say travel writing, when I think of that genre, because that's the one genre I would ascribe to yours, because it is nonfiction.
Right.
And it is real world. That's where I would put it. Maybe that or in the nature. One of the two.
Yeah,
nature, wildlife.
It's somewhere in between. The other thing about travel writing, at least most of the travel writing that I've read, is that a lot of it seems to be just a vehicle for, well, I don't know about just.
Tourism?
No, that's not what I was going to say, but I suppose that could be part of it too. It seems like a vehicle for the author to share their opinion about a bunch of stuff.
Oh.
Typically political stuff, socio-political stuff. I've read several road trips across America books, and a lot of it ends up being commentary on the country and not in a way like they're actually going out there seeking the truth and trying to investigate and really get at the heart of things, but in such a way that they had these opinions already. They're going to go out and they're going to pick out anecdotes that support their opinion, and to various degrees ram it down your throat. Yeah, and I've always tried very hard not to do that.
Let's say, look at it this way: if that's the market, injecting your voice, which is not that, would be a nice fresh wind into that genre.
You could be right, and I've kind of hoped that. I like that kind of writing, but I don't like that part of it so much. And that was another thing that That was something else that I thought about when I first started my blog. I thought, I'm not going to do that thing that all the other travel writers do that makes me mad. And
that's how I feel about YA.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which we can talk about.
Yeah, how so?
Well, oh, excuse me. With YA, I had an idea to write a young adult. I had the idea to write a young adult fantasy novel, but I didn't want to write it with all of the young adult fantasy tropes.
Okay.
Like, the girl falls in love with the main guy, and just I can't even think of
the love triangle.
Yeah, the love triangle and the weird. You're the heroine from Destiny and
You're the chosen one.
Yeah, and the dystopian thing, and I didn't want any of that. I wanted it to be, because I feel like those are pretty demeaning and base, and they don't really empower. Like I feel like the main difference between traditional male writing, stuff written for young men and stuff written for young women, varies differently when it comes to those tropes. I mean, there are similar coinciding tropes, but I didn't think to come up with a lot of examples for this, but like the Divergent series, the Hunger Games series, those dystopian world things, the Fifth Wave, pretty much all of the YA fiction and fantasy that is in bookstores or libraries is geared towards girls. Mm-hmm. Since a lot of teenage girls read and teenage boys don't. So I wanted to write something that would appeal to teenage boys, but didn't follow all the normal tropes. So, the main character wasn't destined by birth to do something. They didn't live in a dystopia. They didn't fall in love with the first girl they met, or the boy, or whatever, depending on the character. I had two different stories going on at the same time. Because I wanted to write something that appealed to teens, but wasn't, just followed all the same things. Because those things, they didn't appeal to me as a teenager, and they were frustrating.
And I'm sure they didn't appeal to other people, too.
Yeah. But it's been tough, because one of the things that makes a certain genre that genre are the tropes. Which it's a certain thing it's hard to get away from.
Yeah, and
it just depends on how much you want to subscribe to them, I guess.
It tends to be a very trendy genre, I think, too. Like trends run through it, and everything is this for a while, and then it changes.
Like vampires and dystopia,
and then everything.
And the weird fantasy stuff. It's been tough, but back to the idea of selling your work, though. I've been trying to. I've sent my short stories to contests or to magazine subscriptions, trying to get published. I've sent queries to agents for my novels, and all of them have come back as rejections. And it's tough. You kind of get to a point. I mean, at least for me, I get to a point where I have to question my own ability, and I've been dealing with that a little bit recently. I can get a lot of praise from people that know me. Right. But once I go out into the real world and I get, rejection without telling me what's wrong with it, which is the big thing, you start to, feel like, maybe the people that know me are just being nice. And so I've been dealing with I've been dealing with a lot of self-doubt recently when it comes to my writing.
Yeah, I think everybody who's ever been published probably deals with that.
True. But the optimism level the past couple years before that was like, oh, just 2 rejections, 10 rejections. Oh, that's fine. I still got ideas. I'm still writing. It's great. And then it's just like 3 years later. It's like I know people deal with rejections for a long time.
Right. And very famous authors deal with dozens or hundreds of rejections.
Yeah, and you just have to. And I think, I don't know if this is true of every author, but for me, it's like I get to a point where it's like I have to evaluate how much time I want to dedicate to this. Is it really something that I'm good at? Yeah. And kind of have that introspection about
that's a fair
the whole
enough
idea.
Thing to think about. I also think one other thing about that is I think that when you're specifically writing something that goes against the grain of what's being published right now, I think you're going to get even more rejection.
Oh yeah, no, true. But you got to break the mold. Yeah, you got to try anyway.
And I've had a similar problem where I haven't really gotten much interest on my stuff from people who don't know me, and I haven't sent anything in to magazines or anything like that, but I've done quite a bit of sharing on various places online, just trying to get feedback. Writers forums, and sometimes I've sent my blog posts to a park or a hotel where I stayed, saying, "Hey, here's this thing I wrote about when I stayed at your place," and I haven't gotten anything.
Really?
No feedback whatsoever. I gotten a few views. I can tell. I look at my stats and I have some views from it. No feedback whatsoever. And I've gone to the writing group and I've read my stuff, and I get lots of, "Oh yeah, that's really good. I really liked it. It's really nice. It feels like I was there with you." But nothing beyond.
So you're
that.
saying that my praise isn't helping you at
no,
all?
I'm very happy. I'm very happy that everybody that reads it says that. But
because I wouldn't bullshit you.
I know, not a whole lot of people saying that they're interested in reading more, though. In fact, I've had several people tell me something like, "Oh, this is really good and you're talented, but it's not really the kind of thing I would read."
Yeah.
Which I appreciate them saying that.
Well, because in that vein, I'd say that your genre is very niche.
Yeah, I think for sure.
Memoirs, essentially,
Yeah.
are very niche. Like, you have to care about the person you're reading about.
Yeah.
In one way, or at least be appreciative of the nature side of it, right?
Right.
Which I think that it's good that you're getting positive feedback, right? With your writing.
Yeah.
Because you could write all this stuff and people, whether or not they like the genre, could just be like, "This is kind of boring, whatever."
Right. Yeah, the feedback I've gotten has been good.
So I just think with your search, it's going to be a little bit harder than me because your genre is so niche.
Yeah.
So you have to find that right group of people who read those things.
Yeah.
Which, me trying to send out my depressing short stories about people dealing with tough emotions that don't have cathartic endings isn't going to get a lot of people
That's true.
to like it, because people want happy endings.
Right.
Or, to be pulled at their heartstrings, but in a good way.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal with the emotional turmoil of a character and have it not work out, even though that's real life.
Yeah. So
I think in that regard, I'm having a lot of trouble because, you've told me, and I've heard from a lot of other people that I write well, that my voices are good, and all those things that you need to have as a good writer. But to get it out into a broader audience, you have to have the right medium for that to be disseminated. Like, I've put my writing into a couple different contests on different sites, and I always wonder is like, are they going to like my writing as a person that they are, that they like as a man or as a woman or young or old? Like, what are their biases as a person, as a judge for my writing?
Oh, right.
And like, that's always tough to gauge too, because I think one of the problems that I have as a writer is that I don't read a lot of things outside of, I'll read maybe 10 books a year or whatever, but I don't read short stories in magazines. I'm not really involved in that world of writing.
So you're not really reading the sort of stuff that you're writing. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I'm not that, but I'm not engaged in the forums, say.
Yeah, okay.
That I try to put my stuff into.
Right, okay.
Like, I don't know the people that they, like, "Oh, this is being judged by author blah, blah, blah." I'm like, I don't know who that, should I know who that is?
Yeah, okay.
If I read this e-magazine, would I know who they are?
And you don't really know who else you're being compared against and all that.
And, because I don't read, this is my own fault. Like, I don't read past submissions. I don't read guidelines. I do read guidelines. I'm not stupid. I don't just throw my stuff anywhere. But I try and put my stuff in the right places, So I obviously, as someone who writes literary fiction, I wouldn't send those pieces into a sci-fi magazine.
Right.
Right. But literary is very broad.
But
So trying to find the right person with the right temperament to appreciate my writing for what it is.
Yeah.
To give it.
You're not really breathing the same literary air that they're breathing.
Exactly.
And I don't really blame you for not doing that.
I feel like part of me I should kind of wade in a little bit just to know what I'm doing, like where I'm going and who I'm putting my stuff into. But if I'm not interested in a real sense, then I don't want to spend the time. You know, like when I had the idea to write a YA novel, I was like, maybe I should read a couple, and I did, and I hated it, and I stopped because it's just like, I don't like this. I want to write something that isn't this, but sort of, you know.
And in a way that might be a good thing, that you're not contaminated with all the other ideas that are out there and similar things. I mean, I don't know. As much as I would say that reading in general is the best way to improve your writing, I'm not sure it would help that much to read similar things to what you're doing.
No.
Except just to figure out if what you're doing has been done already and it's been done better than you could ever do or something like that. I've run into that kind of stuff before too.
True.
We just totally invalidate my whole idea.
Yeah, no, I've had to deal with that before. But what I usually have sought to read are things that I kind of want to break into. Like, I'd never really read horror before, and I wanted to write something that was horror based. Like for a couple of years, I gave myself a lot of writing assignments, essentially. Like, write something in the horror genre, write something in the mystery genre, write something like this, write something like that, this type of character, just to kind of broaden my own writing prowess. So I would read things in different genres. Like, I read high fantasy, I read sci-fi, I would read literary fiction from the 19th century.
Yeah.
I'd read, stuff from the 20th century. Just different genres, different authors, but not necessarily trying to find a favorite author, though I did in my pursuit. But, just trying to hear different voices, different methods of writing, so that when I started to write, I could form my own voice, so that I wouldn't be a carbon copy of Stephen King, or I wouldn't be a carbon copy of James Patterson, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that I would have bits and pieces of a bunch of different authors, and then kind of interject my own voice into my writing.
Are there any other authors you can think of that have directly influenced your style?
I'd say when it comes to... So it depends on the genre. Like, when I was writing my horror series, I was definitely very influenced by Lovecraft with his mythos, not necessarily his views, because I'm not a racist.
Yeah.
But just the idea of human insanity and the wider world and all this kind of like really grand stuff that he talked about, that influenced me.
His writing style too.
His writing style, yeah. Like, some stuff, I actually wrote a couple things in his style, which is like, he was in the early 20th century, but he wrote with a very like 17th, 18th century voice.
Yeah.
With a lot of his stuff, because that's from not interviews, but like letters he's written and like the way he's talked about writing and life. He wished he was alive in the 1700s.
Yeah, I've heard that too. So
he was a really weird guy. But so that kind of has influenced me. I think when it comes to, I've been compared to a couple different writers. My friend Virgil once said that some of my writing, and not really my poetry, but some of my writing reminded him of Virginia Woolf, which I've never read.
I haven't either. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've never read her before, but he said that some of my stuff reminded him of her. And I think with my personal, like, not my personal stuff, my literary stuff, I try to take cues from some authors that I've read, like Murakami and Dostoevsky. I try to write people as real as possible.
Yeah. And
to make their emotional ties to others as real as possible. That's one thing that I try to emulate. Because, like, Murakami, while he has really weird situations for some of his characters in some of his books, like I said earlier, his settings are really normal. And he writes them really well. And he writes his characters he from what I've read, and obviously they're all translations because he writes in Japanese, so there might be some disconnects there, but all of his characters don't really read like literary characters, if that makes sense.
Oh, really?
They don't, in my view, they don't read like people in a book. Kind of like how Dostoevsky's characters, when they talk, they can talk for a whole page.
You mean they're more realistic? Than...
Yeah, they're more realistic than literary.
Okay.
In how they're displayed, and I kind of wanted to emulate that so that when I'm writing, I can capture some sort of real, whether I'm writing about the 1990s or the 2000s or whatever, that I'm capturing something real enough emotionally and contextually that if someone reads it 100 years from now, they can still, kind of like how when we read Dostoevsky or anything like that, so it was written in the 1840s.
Yeah, that's a really good goal.
But you can relate to it still.
Right. Try to make it timeless.
Yeah.
Don't try to. Yeah, I think that's a really good goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to write the characters that are timeless and the emotions that they deal with, so that they feel timeless.
Yeah.
Like in one of my recent endeavors, my story about a character joining a suicide cult, it deals a lot with depression and emotions and sadness and existentialism and all this kind of stuff that kind of is just a human thing.
Right. Those problems are always going to be around.
Exactly. So regardless of him going onto an internet forum and doing it, or going into some bar in, St. Petersburg, Russia,
right.
The emotions are the same.
Right. It won't matter if someday internet forums don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Or if they're seen as something archaic.
Right. It won't make the rest of the character, the story, and the themes archaic.
No. And that's something that I want to come shine through in my own writing. That's why I really appreciate writers like Murakami and Dostoevsky and Vonnegut too, because Vonnegut, for me, he pushed the boundaries of fiction and satire and really broke the mold a lot in his later works. Like, he didn't write in a very concise literary language. And I've been learning that a lot more recently with the authors that I've kind of gotten more interested in.
Yeah.
The less that an author confines themselves to literary rules, the more I like them.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Like we were talking before about dialogue. Dostoevsky, if you ever read anything of his, you'll have, like in Crime and Punishment, there's a whole chapter. Half of it is one character talking.
Yeah.
The drunk character in the bar talking to the main character. Paragraph upon paragraph is just him talking.
Right.
You won't see that in a Stephen King novel, a James Patterson novel, because people don't write that way. Right. But people talk that way.
Yeah.
And that's one way that Dostoevsky translated his characters. He made them speak in his novels like people speak in real life.
Right. You don't get that in commercial fiction or
no.
most genre fiction or
no. You don't get that level of humanity.
Right.
And that's what I meant by literary characters. Like, if you have, two characters quipping back and forth, quip, 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 that's very literary.
Yeah,
people don't
don't speak that way. Yeah.
No. But having, like, big blocks of text with ellipses and then a subject change. And
people who cut themselves off in the middle of sentences and they don't finish their thought and they interrupt other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Which people have always said, people have said that kind of writing is hard to read.
Well, if it's not done well, it is.
True. But people even say, like, Crime and Punishment, that was tough to read because it's not as digestible as a normal literary piece. Yeah. But to me, the trade-off between ease of reading by just, he said this, she said that, blah, 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 they went into the next room, that kind of ease of reading is traded off for the depth.
Yeah, that's something. Yeah, we should talk about that more when we do a podcast about reading. Yeah, I think we'll have a lot to say about that, actually.
So, but yeah, excuse me. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about writing actually recently because I've been trying to get over my writer's block. Like I said, I joined the writers group again, and
maybe talking about it here will help you.
I hope so. Were there any other topics that you wanted to broach in the vein of writing today?
Well, I guess if I want to run off my influences really quick.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking this was interesting after what you said about not really reading all the sort of stuff that you're writing all the time. The authors that have influenced my travel or nature writing or whatever we've decided to call it, almost none of them write that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Like Tolkien has a big influence on me.
Though I would say that the way you write with the level of detail you put in is very Tolkien.
I know you've said that before, and I appreciate that because I think that, I don't know if it's deliberate, but I do think that, I mean, Tolkien's had a big influence on me, and I'll talk about that when we talk about books too. But I'm sure that my writing is influenced by him. And something interesting, though, I say that he's not a travel or nature writer, but the last time I read Lord of the Rings, I thought, this kind of reads like a backpacking trip through a mythological land.
Yep.
Large parts of it do, and I love it for that reason.
Yep.
But some of the other authors, Cormac McCarthy has been a big influence on me, and his kind of biblical language and diction. Hemingway to some extent, although I've kind of gotten away from his short declarative sentences that he's really famous for. But what I do like about Hemingway is his iceberg idea. Do you know what I'm talking about? I can't remember if he actually used the term iceberg or if that just sort of came in criticism of his work. But he had a way of describing just the tip of the iceberg and letting the reader assume the rest of it, the real depth.
Yeah.
The larger part of it, the depth, the reader would just assume based upon the little bit that he gave. I think I still do that a little bit. I like that idea a lot. I think I've been partly influenced by epic poetry, weirdly enough. Stuff like Paradise Lost and The Divine Comedy and...
In what way?
The one specific way I can think is that in my writing, I kind of have different registers where there's just like a conversational register for a while, and then I climb a mountain or something, and I'm filled with that feeling that I was talking about.
So you get more philosophical.
Yeah, my writing goes into like a different register, and I use different language, and it gets more...
I've noticed that.
Maybe even more religious. And that's something that Dante did in the Divine Comedy. There's the 3 books of the Divine Comedy. Each one, his language gets more elevated as he's climbing toward heaven in it, which I think is a really cool idea and sort of...
I can see that.
I don't know if it directly inspired me, but there's a similarity in what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see like a tonal shift, I'd say, between like when you're on the ground. Like when you talked about in the most recent posts, he went to Maine to visit me, and when the times where he was in my apartment with me, it was very just like basic, we're just hanging out kind of language. We're just hanging out, watching movies,
right,
having a drink. But then once you get on the road and you start going towards your destination, when you start talking about climbing the mountain, it was the mountain that you went to?
Tumbledown Mountain.
Yeah, when you went to Tumbledown. And you get to the lake, and the guys that you talk to are like, yeah, you shouldn't go up any farther.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, fuck you. I'm going to go. I might not get another chance to do this.
Right.
And then as you say, like when you ascend the mountain and you get to the peak and you look over and you just see the landscape around you, you definitely talk in a different language than when you were at my apartment.
Yeah, and I think I do that on purpose because sometimes when you're reading something or you're watching a movie and there are tonal shifts in it, they're weird. You say there's issues with the tone in this book or this movie. But I think that different tones are appropriate for different situations. Yeah, and I try to do that in my writing.
Yeah, because when you're living your life, you're not, mid-range all the time.
Right. You just have to do it correctly.
Yeah,
you have to do it like... it has to harmonize. It's almost musical.
It has to feel natural, like a crescendo and
exactly
in music. So other than those, like, would you say you have any other more contemporary influences or no?
I don't know. I don't think so. I really like. There's a couple other nature writers that I really like, but I think they're both. think they're dead. I don't know if there's anybody writing right now. I really like Sigurd Olsen, who wrote about like the Boundary Waters region in Minnesota and Canada. I think he died though. Who else? There's a book called The Peregrine. No, is it called The Peregrine?
It sounds familiar.
I think it's called The Peregrine. I think his name is Baker, but I could be getting both of those things wrong. His writing is very similar to what I would like to do.
Yeah.
The best actual travel writer, like road trip around America writer that I know of is William Least Heat Moon, who wrote Blue Highways. And his writing style is pretty similar to what I would want to do. But it seems like by the time I read those last three guys, I'd already kind of developed my own style based on other stuff, though.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be similar. And I thought,
better.
Yeah, for sure, better. And I thought, I want to write like this.
Wait, no, I'm saying yours is better.
Oh, no.
I
don't think so.
Like you're just agreeing with me. Yeah, I'm better.
Oh, yeah, of course mine's better.
I'm better. I'm just better. No, because, like, talking about my influences, I was thinking about, I actually wrote, like, in the back of one of my notebooks, I started writing down each author that I had a series of books of on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
Like, why I kept going back to them.
Yeah.
And what about them I liked, because I liked them for different reasons. Like, I like reading Michael Crichton, partially because Jurassic Park is my favorite movie, but that has nothing to do with his actual books. I like how he can explain something scientifically, but also it be palatable. Yeah. I like that. I like Murakami because of his characters and the worlds he builds. I like Vonnegut because of his view of the world, his satire, and how his characters are. I like, I don't really like a lot of Stephen King's writing, but I like his work ethic.
Yeah. Have you read his book on writing?
Yes, I have read his book on writing. That's actually the first Stephen King book I ever read.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was never really big into horror books. Mm-hmm. Well, reading, like I said before, I'm into reading when I was young. But when I said I want to start writing, I started to read a lot more, because I felt like if I'm going to write anything, I should read anything. Yeah. I should read something. So I started reading Jurassic Park. Books based on, or movies, books that had been turned into movies. I read a lot of those because they were easy to translate into my brain. Writing books, things like that to help with my actual technique.
Yeah.
And just exposing myself to different voices and different themes and views just to form my own.
That reminded me of somebody that I forgot to mention. And this is a really far out one, but Steven Pinker is an influence on my writing. He's better known for his evolutionary psychology work and his work on morality and things like that. But he's also a linguist, and I think he's on the usage panel of one of the dictionaries, American Heritage Dictionary, maybe. I don't know. He knows a lot about language, and he wrote a book called The Sense of Style, which is a style guide to writing. It's more to nonfiction writing, more towards academic or scientific writing. Yeah, but I got a lot out of that, and just the bits and pieces in his other books about writing, about how to write in a way that is easier for the brain to process.
Yeah.
How to structure a sentence, what to put first, what to put last.
Which is important, especially in academic writing. Because one of the downfalls of that type of writing that people say, that the layman brings up, is that it's too hard to read. The ideas are too hard to ingest.
I think that was the inspiration for him writing the book, is that academic writing is terrible.
But I've noticed that recently, the past couple of years, I don't know when he published that. It's probably a while ago.
It's his it's his second most recent, I think. It was
really
4 years ago, maybe.
Oh, well, I say a lot of recent scientific writing that I've been not influenced by, but that I've been intrigued by, that I've read, has been very palatable.
Yeah, well, it's good.
And I'd say I'm someone who's more scientifically knowledgeable, when it comes to terms and ideas about things, and there's certain things that I still don't understand, but having things be palatable to everybody, like Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, what was it, astrology or astrophysics on the go or something like that? Or?
Something I can't remember.
It's a really small book, but it's
Yeah.
supposed to like go over like a bunch of different astrophysical
I remember
theories and
seeing
stuff
that one
really
cross
quickly.
my desk at some point.
Yeah. So yeah, I've listened to Steven Pinker talk.
Yeah.
I haven't really read any of his books.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know he wrote those types of things. I did know that he was in. I used to work at a bookstore, and he was in the linguist section with Noam Chomsky and a couple others.
Yeah, he was I think he was a student of Noam Chomsky.
Well, that makes sense.
Talks about him a lot. Disagrees with him a lot.
So the student surpasses the master.
Yeah.
But
I think.
do you want to pitch? Since we've been talking about where our writing is, because we both said our writing is public. Do you want to say where people can find our writing?
That was what I was just going to bring up too.
Sure.
I have a blog. It's a WordPress blog, and it can be found at beyondthecampfire.wordpress.com.
And that is your forays out into the wilderness.
Yes, that is my stories of exploration.
Do you have any that are forthcoming? Because I know you just finished your main.
I did. I just
trilogy.
finished my main one, which was a trip that I took. Was that 3 months ago now?
No.
It was
April.
3. No, it was at the end of May.
Was it?
I think it was the end of May. Yeah. I think because it
trying
was around Memorial Day. Because Memorial Day was about the last day of it. But it's been 3 months and I finally got that out. It took me forever. I recently took a trip to the Lake Erie Islands area that I might do a piece about.
How many posts do you have on there right now? Do you know?
There's about 40.
40?
Yeah.
How long ago do they span? Like how many years?
They go back to 2016.
2016?
Beginning of 2016.
Okay.
I actually am, in 2 days, I'm leaving to go to Michigan again for 9 days, and I'll be writing about that, I'm sure. I don't know yet how I'm going to write about it. I don't know if it's going to be just a chronological story like I've been doing. I'm kind of thinking about branching off into some different stuff. And also, I think I'm going to do some essays. I have ideas for several essays that have something to do with nature, but they're more philosophical. Mm-hmm. And I would like to get a few of those out there this year, and I'll probably just post those on the blog also. Yeah. See what kind of feedback I can get on those.
And my old blog, which was public for 10 years, is kind of defunct now. I'm almost at 300 posts, which is kind of sad, but on my 299th post, I put, we're closed, because I kind of want to be done with it. But my horror one, which is still up, I haven't updated it in a while because I haven't been writing horror, but if anyone wants to read that, I've had a Facebook for it for a while. It's under Dream Worlds. I'm pretty sure that the URL for the blog is dreamworlds.blogspot.com. And if that's wrong, I can always update again in the next podcast when we talk about. You want to talk about reading in the next one? You want to confirm with that one?
I like that idea. Yeah, I want to talk about books and our reading habits. And
yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on that a little bit today, since our reading hasn't been an influence on our writing.
Right.
But there are other things I think both of us have read that don't influence.
Yeah,
our writing.
we'll try not to overlap too much with this.
So, but yeah, if you don't have any, do you have anything else to say? Do you want to? I mean, this is usually when people talk about their other social media platforms. Is there anything that you want to express like with that? Because
I'm terrible at marketing myself.
Yeah, because I don't really write anything on my Twitter other than like shit posting. So.
I don't even think I have a Twitter anymore.
Yeah, so
I've thought I don't even have I should probably start a Facebook page just for the blog. I haven't done that. I've been pretty lazy with it, to be honest.
I mean, writing it and putting it out there is enough of it in itself.
Well, yeah,
that takes a lot of work.
It does take a lot of work. Yeah.
I mean, I was doing the self advertising for my Dream Worlds thing, the horror stuff on Facebook, and that kind of dropped off quick because if you don't keep it, if you don't keep it going,
it's a ton of work.
So, but yeah, I think this wraps up another episode of Subject to Change. You catch us next time, and we'll be talking about reading. This has been Matt
and Chad.
You guys have a great day.
Thanks for listening.